Hi, I'm the Moonlit Page Turner, and this is my first quarter reads of 2025. So these are all the books that I read or started to read and decided to put it away for January, February, and March of 2025. Now, last year when I made these videos, I had three categories. So I did my book club reads, which I have longer videos of, and I have fiction and nonfiction. And so for 2025, I decided to add a fourth category, and that is banned books. Now, I get most of the information of banned books, like the specific schools that they banned them from Pan America. They're a great resource. And in the banned books, I will read both fiction and nonfiction. So I read a lot of banned books in the past. I read a lot last year as well. But I will continue to read more and more because it is important to read the books that they don't want you to read. My book club reads, I'm in two book clubs. I'm in the Savvy Gaming Network's video game book club, and we choose a book each month that is either inspired by or have inspired video games. And so for January, we read Metro, there it is, Metro 2033, and this is by Dmitry Glukhovsky, and this is the novel that inspired the game. So if you're not familiar with Metro, the book Metro, as well as the video game, follows Artyom, and he is a young man, I think he's 18 in both, and he lives in the metro system in Russia, and this takes place after the basically nuclear holocaust. So to go up above the surface is extremely dangerous, and so he's put on missions, and there are creatures there that have been developed basically because of the radiation. So it's actually a reread for me because I've read this book before, but it still held up. So I gave this one 4 stars. We also read a FNAF book, so Five Nights at Freddy, and this one Savvy has my copy of. And so we read The Weekend Before, and of course Scott Cawthon is the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, so he is mentioned as the author, but it was really written by E.C. Myers. And this book is a choose your own adventure. So you are a security guard, and this takes place the weekend before the first game starts. And so you're a security guard. It's your last week of work. You have a young daughter at home, and so each night you have to choose certain things within the book, and sometimes you survive that night, and sometimes you don't, and then you have to go back. So it plays a lot like a video game, as well as a choose your own adventure. It was more interesting than I thought it was. I think there was some quirks that needed to be kind of changed because it was kind of obvious if you died by the next page because you could see it on the bottom. But I'm really glad I read it. It was really interesting, and so we will probably read more of them in the future because it was a request for us. And then for March, because the Last of Us TV show is coming back, so we read the comic The Last of Us American Dreams, and this is, Neil Druckmann is kind of the creator, and he does a lot of the writing, as well as Faith Erin Hicks she is the illustrator, and she did part of the story as well. And so this book, or it's a comic, this graphic novel, is about how Ellie and Riley meet, and Riley is a really important character in the first game for Ellie, and she is also part of the DLC as well as one of the episodes in the television show. So there wasn't a lot of information in here that we didn't know before. It was a little disappointing because we do see them meet, but other than that, they meet the Fireflies and Marlene, but really there wasn't a whole lot to the story. So that one was kind of disappointing. For my Read the World series that I have here on YouTube, I have 3 countries to talk about. So the videos that are already on YouTube, and you can check them out. Some of them may be on it after, if you're watching this video a little later. So for Bosnia, I have How the Soldier Repairs the Gramophone, as well as Goodbye Sarajevo. Goodbye Sarajevo is nonfiction. It is a story about 2 sisters during the war. One stays in Bosnia and one becomes a refugee in Croatia. And then How the Soldier Repairs the Gramophone is a fiction story, but it also deals with the war in Bosnia. And then for Botswana, which is the next country, I have A Question of Power, and this is by Bessie Head. And this is, technically it's fiction, but it really is kind of autobiographical because Bessie Head will go through some of the same experiences as her main character, Elizabeth, which Bessie is a nickname for Elizabeth. She deals with a lot of mental illness, and she has like visions at night. I was not super impressed with this one. I would want to hear about more of her life in reality. I found that to be really interesting. She gets to be part of like a farm co-op, and so I really like that part. But the nightly visions, they were scattered and they're kind of a little too much, and they became overwhelming in the book as well. I'm sure they're overwhelming for her if this is what happened to her, but I preferred kind of more to read about what is happening in Botswana and her life with that. The other book that I chose was The Careless Seamstress, and this is by T.J. Dima. This is a book of poetry, and there's a motif of sewing as well as an influence of Greek mythology. This is probably one of the better collections of poetry that I've read in the last couple of years, so I was really, really glad that I saw this come up as an option, and I'm really, really glad that I read it. And the third country, I have two books for Brazil, which is the third country on there. I am not quite done with the second book, but I did finish What Are the Blind Men Dreaming? And this is technically by 3 different authors because Noemi Jaffe is the credited author on here, and she writes the majority of the book. But the book starts off with her mother, who was a Nazi concentration camp survivor. And so she was in Auschwitz, and she leaves Auschwitz. She goes to Sweden. Then she goes back to her hometown, which is Yugoslavia. And then she meets her husband, and they move to Brazil, which is where she raises Naomi Jaffe. And then Naomi, basically, she writes a bunch of little essays reflecting on the journal entries of her mother. And then at the very end, we see Naomi's daughter, who they went on a trip to Auschwitz to kind of see some of the things that her then grandmother experienced. And so I've read a lot of firsthand concentration camp survivor stories. They are all very important, but they all have a lot of the same similarities in it. So it was not something new, but I really liked Naomi's reflection on what it's like to be raised by someone who goes through experiences like that. And then again, you see kind of it reflected in her granddaughter as well. So while the first part of it, again, it's always important to hear survivor stories, was not super interesting to me to read just because of the way that she wrote it, and I'll go deeper into that in my Read the World series video. But I really liked the essays that Naomi wrote in reflection. I thought that they were really well written, so I did end up really, really liking this. The next set of books that I'm going to talk about are nonfiction. So I do have some nonfiction in my banned book series as well, but we'll get to that next. So for nonfiction, one of the books that I read was this one that like popped up a lot in videos that I saw, and it looked really interesting. I love Breakfast at Tiffany's. It's one of my favorite movies. I think it's besides, I think it's one of Audrey Hepburn's most known performances. I like some of her other ones a little bit more because I've seen pretty much all of her movies. But this is Sam Wasson wrote Fifth Avenue, 5 a.m. And the content of the book was not super surprising. They do go into the characters of the play and the actors, and we see a lot of background on Truman Capote, who wrote Breakfast at Tiffany's before it became a movie. We see the background of Audrey Hepburn, and we see very little of the other actors in there. Although, if you know Breakfast at Tiffany's, there is a very controversial actor choice, and that would be Mickey Rooney. They do talk about the boycott in Sacramento, so a lot of people don't know about that. The fact that he was playing a Japanese person and was not playing it very well, if you've seen the movie. And so I'm glad that the community in Sacramento was like, even at that time period, was like, oh, hell no. They give you little tidbits of information. I feel like with Truman Capote, I actually had to go watch a bunch of YouTube videos on his swans because I didn't watch that series, but I found a couple other YouTube videos about the women in his life that inspired Breakfast at Tiffany's. They are mentioned in here, but not a lot of background is given. I liked the way that Wasson set it up. It's almost like in acts. So you get like the first act is Truman Capote, the second act is Audrey Hepburn, the third act is the directors trying to get the movie together. So I thought the way that he put this together was better than the information that was in it. So I think if you're a big Audrey Hepburn fan or a big fan of Breakfast at Tiffany's, you should definitely check it out. I found, again, the information to be stuff that I've already known, so nothing was really surprising. This is not a new book, though, so the information has been out for a while. The next book that I am going to talk about, I got on Libby, and I actually listened to it, which the narrator did an excellent job. And that is A Black Woman's History of the United States. And there is a series of books within the publication where they basically look at United States history through different spectrums. And so this one was just about Black women. And it starts before the United States was a country, with the expeditions of exploration with the Spanish, with some of the Black women that aided in those explorations. And then it went all the way up to modern times. They do spend a lot of time talking about Rosa Parks and Rosa Parks' history, which if you just get it in like a high school history class, you get like a paragraph. She's really important to the civil rights movement, but she's even more important than a lot of people know. So that was put together by Diana Ramey Berry and Kelly Nicole Gross. There are other people that wrote for it, but they are the two main editors. I would suggest listening to it. The narration was great, and it was really enthralling. I like the fact that they looked at U.S. history through kind of, you get the wide spectrum of the time period of what it's like to be a Black woman, and then they give you specific examples as well. So excellent. I think I gave it 5 stars, so I really enjoyed it. I read a lot of different types of books. So we had a history book, we had an entertainment book. I do work in education, so I'm always reading books about a whole bunch of stuff. So I think before I've talked about some of the different other, like Charlotte Mason and things like that. So Waldorf education. Waldorf is an educational philosophy. The reason why it's called Waldorf is because the person that started it at the Waldorf cigarette company, and he was asked to start classes for the children of the people that worked there, and so that is why it's called Waldorf. It is something that picked up later, though, because Waldorf cigarette company, this is after World War II, so we're talking like 1940s. It picks up in the United States in the 70s and 80s when we have this rise of homeschool. There are Waldorf schools all around the world now, and they will tell you it again and again and again and again. So the complaint that I had about this book is I almost DNF'd it. I almost put it down because it is a collection of essays, like short, like 2-3 pages essays. And they're telling different aspects about Waldorf education. But the first part of the book, you hear the story about the Waldorf cigarette company in every single essay. So I was like, I'm not going to get anything new from this book. And it wasn't until I got past that first part that they go into the actual Waldorf philosophy. Waldorf has a lot of criticism in the education world because it does focus on not academic skills for young children. It wants them to play, to be imaginative, to have that wonder. And so that's great because a lot of kids lose that really early. However, they tend to find that people with Waldorf education, like strict Waldorf education, are late readers, and that can sometimes not work well. Same thing for math. Math is something that they hit later. It does get very specific into the things they teach and the ideas and where they teach different things throughout the world. It is somewhat education based in some places. It kind of depends on like where the school is what their continuing philosophy is, because they're fitting the niche of their clients. But I do talk about that even if you're a Christian, you can still learn about Greek mythology and pagans. Like, it doesn't mean that it's going to convert you. And so we're seeing kind of, especially in education, a push for more Christianity in the classroom and to step away from the history that is there, because people think that that's going to take them away from Christianity. But for centuries, we've been teaching about Greek and Roman mythology. You learn about the Mayans and the Aztecs. That's not going to make you a pagan just because you hear about it. So I did like the fact that they spelled that out in there and was like, hey, yes, we have an education background or a religious background in our education, but that doesn't mean we can't learn about other cultures. So I really appreciate that. It's really short reads, little essays. It did take me a lot longer than I thought it was because it is little short things. And while I agree with some Waldorf stuff, I don't really agree with all of it. But it finally, after the first part, after I learned about the Waldorf cigarette school probably 8 times, or the Waldorf cigarette company and the school within it 8 times, then I was like, okay, I appreciated all the information. It definitely feels like a sales guide though. Like you had a bunch of little pamphlets about the different, like this is what you learn in history, this is what you learn in English. That's kind of what it felt like that it was put together. So it is definitely kind of like a sales guide. And I got this from my local library. The final one for nonfiction that I'm going to talk about before I get into the banned books is The Financial Feminist by Tori Dunlap. And this one I listened to on audio, and Tori reads it. She is part of, I think, her first 100K, I think is the program that she has, and she's on social media and all of that. And so there's this financial feminist directed more towards, I would say, younger women on how to look at your finances in a different way. I read a lot of different types of books. I've read a lot of financial books. I read one last year. This one was not for me. I think if you're in debt, she does put some like boundaries and ideas on how to get out of debt. She does talk about retirement plans, and she goes into it somewhat, but not. It's your like if you were to Google it, you'd get the same information. She does apologize to her parents at the beginning of the book because she will curse throughout the book. It's just kind of her style, and if you're not into that, then I would not recommend this book. She also talks about Timothée Chalamet because she has a huge crush on him a lot. So I think if I took a shot every time that she said Chalamet, I probably would have been in the hospital. But I think there's some good information. If you're just starting to learn about finance, I would suggest it for you, but it just was not for me. All right, let's talk about banned books. Now, in the United States, which is where I live, we've been banning books since before we were a country. So banned books is not a new thing. However, in the past really 10 years, but 5, it's really ramped up. And it's the people that are banning books in schools, mainly high schools. It is a very small group of people with the same kind of background. They are white, women, Christian, but it is literally a handful of people that are going after these books in the school. And I am not someone who is for censorship, so I do read a lot of banned books. I have read a lot in the past. My first book last year was Sold, and that is one of the most banned books. It was like one of my favorite books that I read that year. I could see why it would be difficult for kids to read because it is about sexual slavery. But again, these things happen in real life and they're important. And I was a high school English teacher, and I see these books that are getting banned are the books that our kids love to read. And in order to like instill that love of reading, let's stop taking it away from them and let them have choices. Because in high schools, you have ages 14 through 18, so you have these adults that are not allowed to read these books. And you may say, well, they can just buy it on their own. But if you're in Utah, you can actually get into trouble, disciplinary actions in your school by bringing these books into the classroom, even though you bought it yourself. So while these books are not for everyone, and I don't think they are, I don't think everyone should read them, you should have the choice to read them if you choose. Because reading is different for everyone. We all come with our different experiences. So I have 4 banned books to talk about. I have read a whole bunch more. I am getting my book from my book list from Pen America, who put a spreadsheet together from mainly Florida. It is happening in more and more states, and so I'm checking them off as I go. But one of the, again, top banned books is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And Toni Morrison is a great American author. So if you're looking for a John Steinbeck alternative, because he's not my favorite, Toni Morrison, to me, fantastic writer. The stuff that she writes about, because I read a couple of her books, are very like difficult topics. She is a black woman. She has gone through stuff in her life, and she's seen things in her own community. The Bluest Eyes is about incest. And this young girl is impregnated by her father. It is not only incest, but she was sexually assaulted. And we see the story of her through the people around her. So you actually get little tidbits of her story through the other characters that are around her. You see her father's story, you see the girls that are with her, because there's two girls that she comes to live with, and so they talk about her as well. So that part of the storytelling is really unique, and this book is fantastic written. Like, Toni Morrison is definitely one of the best American authors, if not one of the best authors of all time. So it does deal with racism, does deal with sexual assault, it does deal with young teenage pregnancy, as well as a whole bunch of other things, which again happen all the time. So I've said in previous videos, we'll stop writing about them when they stop happening. But it was a difficult topic. I was listening to it as I was walking with my dog, and I would start crying at the park. So there are trigger warnings and all of that, but it's definitely worth reading. Another amazing book that has been banned is All Boys Aren't Blue, and this is a memoir, and this is by George M. Johnson, and it is about being a Black queer man growing up in the South. And so he fortunately had a very supportive family. It takes his dad a little longer to be supportive of him, but they end up bonding over sports, and so he has a lot of support, which is great to read because it's not always there. The book does talk about some of his first sexual experiences, and one of those is with a family member, and so he does talk about it, not very descriptively, but very straightforward. This is what it is. I know it was wrong, and then he talks about it. So, fantastic book. He narrates the audiobook. I loved it. Another one that blows my mind why this book is banned, because I get there's sexual references, it's uncomfortable topics for the other two. The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, I think is how you say her name. She also narrates the book. It is a book written kind of in verse as a story. X is the main character. She writes poetry, she writes a lot. And then her teacher encourages her to join a poetry class. She is a young Latino Catholic, and growing up she meets a boy. Her mom does not approve. They get into an awful fight. She has a twin who is a large part of the story. It's kind of underwritten, but he's a good support for her. There is a part in the story where X and this boy that she's seeing, they're about to have sex, and then she decides to stop it, and he is okay with that, which she in the story is like, oh, I didn't know that was okay, that I could do that. So important for teenage girls to hear that, and teenage boys. That is about as explicit as it gets. She gets called a whore by her mom. And I think the only reason why this book is banned because there's large portions of it that are in Spanish. And I feel like the person that wanted to ban it doesn't understand Spanish. Do you need to understand Spanish to understand this book? No, not at all. Not at all. So I think that's the only reason why it was banned, because it definitely should not be. And I could see, I know kids who have read this book, and it's great. They love it. One book that I did not love, that is the last of the banned books that I'll talk about before going into the other fiction books that I've read. This is the one book that I DNF'd. So I had to put it down because I got a third of the way through and I was already over it. It is a banned book. It is called 19 Minutes, and it is by Jodi Picoult. It has to do with school shootings. So it's the 19 minutes that take place at the beginning throughout until the police come in for the school shooter. Jodi Picoult is known for, she's got like an M. Night Shyamalan reputation where there is a twist to the story. I figured out the twist of the story within the first 15 minutes of the book. So that was not surprising to me. The thing that I really did not like about the book, it was not about the kids. It was about their parents. There's two main characters of the story. Their moms used to be friends and they're no longer friends. And you hear their background of the story of them becoming moms and their relationship and then why they're no longer friends. And then you see some of the stuff with the kids. I had a real problem with the school shooter. His mom, he gets bullied at school, so his mom decides that she's going to punish him if he doesn't stand up for himself. So not only is he getting bullied, but now he's getting punished by his mom because he's getting bullied. So that's when I was like, I'm done. So I know what the twist of the book is because I figured it out. And then when I would look to see, like, is this book worth reading, it confirmed what I already knew. So it just irritated me. Why is it banned? It's a really long book for a book to be in high school, but it's about school shooting and domestic violence. So again, that's part of teenage life now. So people will be making choices. If you want to read it, read it. A lot of people really loved it. It was just not for me. All right, for the last section of the books that I read, these are the fiction books. And so I'm going to start with the books that I was not so into, and I'll end with some of my favorite reads. I have, I think, more 5-star reads in this quarter than I did all of last year. So I'm really excited that I'm reading a lot of better books, or I must be in a better mood. I don't know. But one of the first books that I read was The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. And this was a story about a young Indigenous girl who was kidnapped at the age of 4. Her family, they are berry pickers, hence the title. We see the young girl that's kidnapped, we see her grow up with her kidnappers, and she discovers who she is towards the end of the book. And then you see the family that she was taken from and how they kind of live on without her. It's a very difficult subject. It has to do, again, with the fact that Native Americans, when they go missing, we don't look for them. And also the history of their children being taken away from them, which is sometimes still happening. So, difficult topic. I was not really into it. I found the background of the Indigenous family. I like that story a little bit better than the story of the young girl who then grew up and then discovered that, because you know who it is. So I kind of almost wish that she would have started with a story about her being kidnapped, or a little girl being kidnapped, and then you read this really odd story about this random lady growing up with a strange mom who won't let her like go outside, and then we hear about them, versus it being intertwined throughout the story. So I think it would have been a better story for me if it was just rearranged a little differently. But another book that I was not so into was The Name Bearer, and this is by Natalia Hernandez. This is a young adult fantasy book. I really liked like 2/3 of this book, and then the last part of the book, I lost caring. I probably should have DNF'd this book because I did really like the first part of it, and then the last part I was just not so much into. The main character, she kind of goes through 3 names. She is the name bearer. She is chosen to listen to or talk to the flowers. The flowers are the ones that give the names, and then she kind of finds out that the person that she's supposed to give the name to is not a legitimate heir to the throne, and so she's in danger, and they send her to a different school, and she gets a different name, and then she's at the school for warrior girls, and she builds this relationship with the girls around her. So I like those 2 parts of the story, and then it comes to the part where she has to find the name of the prince, and so she is then taken by she ends up traveling with these 2 men, and they get kidnapped, and she has to fight her way through, and like that part of the book I did not care for, like, at all. So I will not be continuing the series because I feel like that's what the series is, more of that. I did like the first 2 parts, and I liked that Hernandez spent a lot of time world building at the beginning, and then I felt like it just fell apart at the end. So The Name Bearer, not necessarily for I like the beginning of it, not the end of it. There are a lot of words in Spanish. Again, if you're just following along, if there's context clues, you know what they're talking about. So it's not, if you're not a Spanish speaker, you can kind of figure out what they're saying. Also, I don't recommend the audiobook. The narrator drove me crazy. And that's probably why I didn't make it very far. The 2 other books that I found a little bit disappointing, Lane Moriarty writes a lot of books. And one of the books that she wrote, she's got there are a lot turned into movies. There's another one coming out soon. But one book that she wrote that when it came out was hugely popular, and everyone I knew read it. And I just, I don't read a lot of books that come out. Like, I don't read them right when they come out, so I read a lot of like older books and things like that. Well, I got a lot of catching up to do. But this was on my TBR list. It was The Husband's Secret. And yeah, I was not into it. It's based in Australia. I thought that the narrator did a great job. There are really three main stories rolled into one, and the three women intertwine. Two of them, the husbands have like secrets. One of them is that the husband is in love with her cousin, and so that makes her flee with her son to Sydney, where she's staying with her mother-in-law, and that's where she runs into these other women. The big secret, though, has to do with a note that one of the wives find, and she's not supposed to find it. It was supposed to be like, in the event of my death, please give this to my wife, and she finds it, and she finds like devastating news. And the part that I found really frustrating is, you know what the right thing to do is, and she's convincing herself not to do it. And she's using her children and the rest of her life as an excuse to do it. But the whole time you're like, come on, girl. Like, do the right thing. Just do the right thing. And her not doing the right thing ends up greatly affecting her family. So I was just frustrated with these characters. I think if I would have read it, though, 10 years ago, I think I would have liked it, because it is a book of its time. But reading it now, they were so frustrating. Another book that I was so disappointed in, because it was like one of the #1 sellers last year, and it is from an author that I love, is The Women by Kristen Hanna. And I have read Nightingale, I read The Four Winds. I had so many people tell me that this was such a great book, and Kristen Hanna has a way of like totally devastating you, and I was prepared for it. I was like, I'm gonna listen to this, I might cry, I might just sit there with myself. But again, it was the main character was so frustrating, and I found her to be so annoying. The point of what Kristen Hanna was trying to do, The Women, is an ode to the women who served in the Vietnam War, because a lot of people think that it was just men soldiers, but there was a whole bunch of nurses over there. Women are involved in every single war throughout history. So I don't want to hear it. They sacrificed they died, they have PTSD, they got diseases, they're trauma galore. So they gave a lot to this country, and it wasn't until very, very recently that they have been highlighted for what they did. So I appreciate Kristen Hanna taking that spotlight that she has to shine on them. I hated the main character. I hated her, and I was not rooting for her for any of the romantic interests that she had. She falls apart. We see PTSD. We see her being basically like spat at, like literally spat at, of the people of the country. You see her family pretty much disown her and what she's done. Yeah, it was a difficult book, but not in the way that I'm used to with Kristen Hanna. I just really, really didn't like the main character. The last book that I'm going to talk about was one of my. Oh, actually, I have two. Haha. They're my two favorites. So I will start with The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This is another young adult fantasy. It was so whimsical and so lovely. The first part of it, I was a little confused. And then the narrator, by the way, excellent as well, does voices, love it. Then as we got more into the story, because there is kind of like two worlds that come together. And when you start off with like the sacrifice, and then they jump you into the other world, confused, but loved it. I think I gave it 4 stars because I was a little confused through some of it, but super whimsical. Love the characters. It is The Girl Who Drank the Moon. Is this this civilization has to sacrifice one child to appease someone, the witch in the woods, who ends up taking the baby anyways, and she delivers it to other people, so the babies are safe and very much loved. She finds this one baby. She doesn't know why these babies are being left in the woods. There is like this cultural aspect to it that they're being lied to, and you find that out later on in the book, but you can kind of figure it out. These babies, though, are loved, and she feeds them starlight, and she accidentally, the baby ends up taking moonlight, which gives it these magical properties, and the baby kind of runs amok with these magical properties and the things that it can do. Beautifully written, loved it. I think Kelly Barnhill, you'll be on my list for favorite author. So I guarantee I'll be reading something else from her. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about was the first book that I read this year. It has been my favorite. I don't know. Last year my first book was Sold, and it was one of my favorites. This year my first book was What You're Looking For Is in the Library. It deserves all of the hype that it has gotten. If you are someone who likes to read books about books, it definitely should be on your list if it is not already. And that is by Michiko Ayoma. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And it's a story about 5 people who go to their community library, and they are looking for one thing, and then they find something else, and it totally changes their life. The librarian is such a great character. She makes little felted things as well, and that's what you get with your book recommendation. And it ties into what they're really looking for. And so it's 5 main chapters, and each chapter is a different character. They do sometimes you see some of it like intertwine, and then of course the librarian is in all of them. So fantastic, loved it. And yeah, I'll be looking for another book by that author as well. One last thing before I go is that I am now going into some book merch. I found a lot of stuff on Etsy, and one of them is the blind date with a book. And so this I purchased on Etsy, and this is by Moonbound Books. And she was fantastic. I got it in only a couple of days. She actually asked for my Goodreads account so that she could see if the book, I got a fantasy book, and I will open it here with you so you can see what it looks like. But I've always wanted to do one of these, and so I just decided to do it just to see what it looked like, and I'm really glad that I did. So some of the stuff that I got in the book, so you can see it, I got some really cool stickers, which I loved. You can choose different genres, and there are a lot of these on Etsy, but so I decided to try one out. She was fantastic, and again, I got it in a couple of days. I got a highlighter, I got a pen, I got my little stickies that I use all the time, a bookmark that you can leave your rating list. This is going to be important for me later. Another bookmark with, you can fill it up. I used to do this with my students. We are booked. So great stickers. And then again, she asked for my Goodreads, so take a look about what book that I will read for the next video. I opened it a little bit, but I haven't actually looked at it because we're gonna look at it together. It's nicely folded too. I appreciate the work that she put into this. All right. So it is Moonbound, a novel by Robin Sloan. So I will put this on my TBR for my second quarter reads, and I will see you then.